I'm sure all of you out there listening have heard of Dubai, the city that we all see in the blockbuster movies, probably most famously from Fast and Furious when they ramped a car from one building to the other. The city of gleaming towers and shining marble, the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. Well, today we're going to be talking to someone who played an integral role in shaping the core, the nucleus of that city into what it is today and transforming it into the economic powerhouse that it is today. So today we have with us Chirag Shah. Chirag is the CEO of International FinCentre Associates. And prior to that, he was the Chief Strategy and Business Development Officer of the Dubai International Financial Center, which is the topic of our conversation today. He has a long track record prior to that of working with American Express, KPMG, Arthur Andersen, and many others. But the focus of our story today is going to be focused on building what is, in my opinion, the coolest and by all objective metrics, one of the most successful financial centers in the world. So with that, Chirag, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. And, you mentioned about Fast and Furious being shot there, and you got the DIFC gate just at the backdrop for yourself. In fact, even Mission Impossible was shot there. And, Tom Cruise, he flies from Burj Khalifa straight into DIFC, that same building. I had the privilege of seeing that shooting.
That's awesome.
For a 2-minute shot.
Oh, man, that is fantastic. So you saw them shoot that live, huh?
I did, yeah.
That's amazing.
Right on the gate.
Yeah. Wow. So with that, Chirag, I'd love to hear, actually, speaking of that story, kind of the story of Chirag Shah. How did you end up going from working in finance and like I said, at American Express and KPMG and Arthur Andersen to kind of leading strategy and business development at this Dubai International Financial Center?
So, it's a funny story, actually. I grew up as a child in Dubai, and that was in the 80s and 90s. And Dubai was a very different place then. It was a boring place. It was a small, port and a town and growing, but still not international, not aspirational, and so on and so forth. And I moved to Mumbai, and in the 90s, India was kind of opening up, and the financial sector was opening up big time over there. I joined Andersen Consulting, which was a top-notch consulting firm that helped in a lot of transformation of that industry. And then in the mid-2000s, around 2004, I was flying to New Zealand, and I flew via Dubai, and I looked at what was happening in the city. And I was just shocked to see how it had developed and progressed. More so, at that trip, I also met a few business colleagues who mentioned that Dubai aims to become a financial center and is going to do these exciting things. And I said, wow, that sounds amazing. As in, you're going to build a financial city from scratch. As somebody who understood the financial industry well, I could see the benefit of doing something like that and how it can transform the landscape, not only for the country, but for an entire region which was in need of a financial industry that served as an international industry for the region. And I reached out to those people who were at the government looking at doing DIFC, and then they said, your experience is right on tap for what we're looking to do, because transforming the financial sector is what we're trying to do, and that's how it started. And I said there can be nothing more important than being part of a journey that's going to have a very high impact. It's something like what you guys are doing, making a difference, doing something that can have a lasting impact on the livelihoods of people, making business more friendly, accessible, and of course, bringing in professionalism, governance of a stature and standard that's not available in the region.
Got it. Thanks for that, Chirag.
So I joined them, and I was there for the first 12 years, from early on till the time it then reached to become the top 10 financial centers in the world, from nowhere.
Awesome. I am extremely curious about this. As you can imagine, with what we're working on at Prospera, the overlap is extremely high. And even before I started working at Prospera, I was fascinated by Dubai, precisely because it's like this It's like this urban paradise of kind of what I've always dreamed of, this cyberpunk future of these super tall buildings and big highways and stuff like that. I just love it. I have some questions relating to kind of what I would call the software side, which most people would consider the governance side. And then Max has some as it relates to kind of the physical built environment side as an architect. So my first question, Chirag, is kind of an open-ended one. So I know in the DFC, you have three main governmental bodies within that special economic zone. You have the International Financial Center Authority, you have the Dubai Financial Services Authority, and you have the DIFC courts. Can you explain to me, especially those first two, the kind of jurisdiction they have relative to one another and how the three interplay together to create one of the best environments for doing business in the world?
Yes, so at the DIFC, like what you do here at Prosper, we created a new country when it came to setting up companies and regulating and doing business, right? So when you're doing that, all the other authorities that are in the local environment are disapplied and they don't have any jurisdiction over there. So you have to create something that kind of addresses all the requirements of any business to operate. So think of it as those, you mentioned about three authorities. So the courts is pretty clear. They come in when there's a dispute or something like that, right? So that's one part of that. But when it comes to the other parts of the government, everything is done by the DIFC authority, which is the core operating authority, except for financial service regulations and supervision. And that is done by the Dubai Financial Services Authority. So think of this as the DFSA is the combination of the Fed and the SEC and all the financial regulators the US has, or for example, in UK, you have the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority, and the Bank of England playing the role of regulating the financial industry. But in addition to that, you have everything else, right, which the government performs, whether it is issuance of visas, registration of companies, giving trade licenses, municipal functions, land registry functions, building permits, everything else. So everything else that the government would normally do as a regulator of business, of activity that's happening over there, would be done by the DIFC authority, which is the center operating body. So that's how broadly we kind of structure the work. And each of these three independent authorities are independent of each other. So that allows to have that balance. So if somebody is overstepping the balance, you have the courts obviously to kind of adjudicate on these matters, but otherwise you have very clear responsibility of what you're doing. And that's very critical, especially for financial industry. You need quite clear independent regulators that can be free of commercial interests when they are regulating these financial firms.
Got it. That makes sense. And obviously working at Prosper, I know firsthand how difficult and expensive it can be to kind of build some of these registries from the ground up, or in the financial industry, for instance, what you guys did over there at the DIFC to kind of build one of the world's most effective, in fact, regulatory and enforcement groups, really. But those people, those financial specialists, especially to stop money laundering, et cetera, are often not cheap. So my question is relating to funding. Is the DIFC self-funded, meaning it has like tax revenues from the jurisdiction that then go back to the DIFC authorities to operate their activities? Or does it receive a subsidy from the greater city of Dubai? And then further, is the DIFC itself or either of these authorities, are these like nonprofits, or are these like for-profits that are looking to grow? So two kind of interrelated questions there.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm glad you asked that, because that's one of the questions a lot of people don't get the answer to correctly, and then they hemorrhage themselves with costs and they effectively kind of sink. You have after the DIFC or before the DIFC, a lot of financial centers or all of these jurisdictions springing up, and they have no clarity on how they will sustain themselves. How are they going to make sure that they're covering all these costs of creating a new country? And that's a pretty important question to ask and answer up front. Having said that, you cannot have all kinds of regulatory bodies be profitable, right? As in all over the world, you have subsidies from the government and so on and so forth. And that may come from the larger pool of taxes typically governments collect and so on and so forth. The DFC was unique, as in we offered from the day go a 0% tax environment guaranteed for 50 years. So there was no tax to be collected. Even in the mainland UAE, there is no tax for businesses anyways. But here it was guaranteed for 50 years. So the question is then, how do you kind of make this sustainable, right? As in you obviously can't be charging people obnoxious amounts of money for licensing fees to recover all your costs. So what was unique is that we embedded the real estate of that jurisdiction into the equation. So what happened is the government started with just assigning a plot of 110 acres to the DIFC authority. And the DIFC authority then had a commercial company as a subsidiary that owned that 110 acres plot. And it used the proceeds of either the land sales or rental income from the revenues that are generated from people coming and doing business there as a means to I may say investing in the regulatory environment and the business environment. And that was the model that was very successful because it kind of enabled you to provide world-class regulatory environment without actually collecting taxes. But at the same time, you're not subsidizing anything because that was just barren land. Now people are coming and working there and generating land sales and rental value out of that. And that was the case. The regulator, however, and the courts are separately funded by the government so that you kind of keep independent of commercial interests of doing business. So the courts and the regulator gets the funding from the government, and then the rest of the businesses of the authority generate revenue, which then again goes back to the government. In addition, of course, as you ramp up, you also get government revenues like collecting transfer fees, licensing fees. You're processing visas for people, and so you get some amount of money from that. But that obviously is a slow ramp up because on day one, you start with one company, right? As in you don't start with 10,000 people working on day one. So that ramps up. And over a period of time, then that became and becomes a substantial component of the revenue as well, in addition to the real estate side of contributing to the expenses of the business.
Got it. That makes total sense. It's almost like you're providing, we sometimes use this catchphrase within the company, but you're providing governance as a service effectively, which people are paying for as a service, the fee for accessing one of the best financial jurisdictions in the world, or a fee for registering your property in there, et cetera. It's much more of a value for value exchange than your normal governmental interactions where you're sitting in a DMV for hours or whatever the case may be. I really like it.
Yeah, in fact, that's how the entire Dubai model is built on, which I call is the purest form of capitalism, because it's like you pay for what you use. You don't pay a tax because you made profits, but you pay if you're using electricity, it's not subsidized. It's at cost plus profit. You use it, you pay for it. If you're using space, if you're buying land, whatever, you pay for what you use. You do not subsidize anybody else. No other business is actually benefiting because you're paying a higher fee, because every business pays license fee, pays fees for employees. There is no discount given to anybody because you are from X company or you're from a particular society class or whatever it is, and that kind of makes it sensible for people to do business because you're paying for what you're using. If I use air conditioning, I pay for it. If I don't use, I don't pay for it. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely love it. And then one final note on this, then I'm going to hand it to Max to talk about the built environment a little bit. I also really love the alignment of incentives that this creates, which a lot of people miss, I think. If you have a governing body which profits in a way, or which, put another way, is only financially sustainable if the businesses and people within that jurisdiction are also doing well, and they're also paying to use your services, which means you're providing value to them, and they in turn are providing value to you, then you have this alignment of incentives where the jurisdiction can't get worse, because if it gets worse, then it starts running out of money really fast. They can't just rest on their laurels and say, oh, exit costs are really high, it's hard to leave Dubai, and we have high taxes, so we don't actually have to do anything. People will just keep giving us money because they have to by law, because there's such a high tax rate or whatever. They can't do that because the only revenue you guys are getting is real estate and then fee for service for these governance operations effectively. So I just love the alignment of incentives that creates. It creates a guardrail on abuse of governmental power that is completely impossible with words on paper in a constitution, in my opinion. Yes, those are important, but nothing can come close to the strength of that alignment of incentives.
And
Yes.
just to kind of reiterate your point, that's a model of many of these upcoming or very successful economies like Singapore, Hong Kong, and Dubai and the IFC, for example. As in, we would have a massive disincentive for every company leaving. As I was leading the business development and strategy team, then my KPIs were very clear. It's not just about getting new companies in alone. It's also making sure two things: the existing companies grow and the existing companies don't leave. So how do we make an environment that is effective and more conducive for people who not to just come in, but also to grow? Because their growth is the growth of the center. It's the growth of everything that we are trying to do. And the measure that we use eventually is not, how many people work there, how many companies are set up. It is the contribution to the GDP that the financial district makes, because that's the most important KPI, and for any country or any economy, right?
Yes.
Quick question, and I'm gonna hand it to Max. Do you know what that number is?
Well, when we did the last calculation, it was almost 3% of the GDP.
That is wild, because Dubai's GDP is massive.
$3 billion, dollars of incremental GDP, which was brought in from just a piece of land that didn't do anything.
And to note for the American audience, that's 271 acres. That's creating $3 billion of value. I just love it. Go ahead, Max.
110 acres actually only.
Oh, even smaller.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm very interested in those kind of things, but especially in the point of buildings, in the point of physical. As an architect, I'm very interested in the building world, and I would love to know: did you build to suit, or did you build first, and then go hunting for tenants after? And another question is related to this: and did you coordinate the initial development, or where were the other firms master planning on building alongside you?
Yeah, okay, that's a good question. It's like a chicken and egg question, right? What do you do? It's also a test of what people expect from a new project, right? As in, if you're as the lead anchor developing the whole construct, not investing in developing, people are going to just laugh at you and say, you just want others to buy land and run away, right? As in, we can't invest in a dream that you're like creating unless you got skin in the game as well. And we wanted to have skin in the game. So it was a mix of everything. As in, from a commercial business standpoint, it was very, very important that we built the right kind of infrastructure that suited a very different class of businesses, which is the financial sector, needing very high quality, commercial office space with a lot of requirements, whether it came to bandwidth or electricity consumption. You have all these traders with massive screens requiring a whole different world of specs when it came to the commercial space, right? It can't even just be primate. It has to be like a super well-suited requirement. At the same time, the district had everything from residential to hotels and other things, which were then going to be linked with the development of the financial construct. So in our early land sales, the plots that were actually sold were some of them are mixed use, but some are residential, some were hotels that were sold. So the financial center authority, or rather the the authority looking after the development of the financial focused on only two things: developing commercial real estate and retail space, and of course the entire district, and being the master plan of the entire district and managing that to a world-class standard. And for the rest of the plots, as a master developer, we put extremely high standards on all the developers on what they could do and what they couldn't do. And then we developed, as the IFC authority, the first set of commercial buildings. The one you see at the backdrop of Trey is the first building that came up, and that's not a very commercially efficient building, because obviously it's like a nice shape, but it's meant to be a iconic landmark. And which it continues to be, and this is now more than 17 years old, and it still looks the same, as in it looks as beautiful and stunning as it did when it was launched. And then around that we had 6 more buildings which were built, all office space buildings, and obviously we had designed these buildings as or these the entire floor plates as something like a cake. You could take the entire floor plate and divide it into whatever, 1,000 square feet office, a 25,000 square feet office, a 50,000 square feet office, because we didn't know, as in, who's going to come, and somebody may come with a requirement for 10,000 square feet, scaling it up to 50,000 and so on and so forth. So all these buildings are designed with in a fashion that you can actually just, you want a specific, you have a specific requirement, we can cater to that. And so you had these 6 commercial buildings around this main building that were there. And then the next block of district had around 10 to 12 buildings, which were roughly like, 7 to 8 story buildings, which again, were commercial offices that could be kind of catered to for different requirements. In addition, we also set up plug and play business offices, like business centers. So firms that came in and they initially did not, for the first 1 or 2 years, had a very small requirement, could use that till they kind of ramp up the rest of their business requirements, but they can come and start their business right away. So that was the whole objective. You don't ask people to say, okay, now, you signed up, now it'll take 2 years to build your office and come after 2 years. No, you start today, we'll give you the business center offices for your plug and play work, and then you ramp up as you need.
Very interested. How about the design profile? How about the aesthetics? How do you decide that? Because Dubai is known like the golden city. There is like a pattern of design that you decide to put into the city, or it just appear from the casualty?
Yeah, so for the financial district, the DIFC district is pretty large, 110 acres. It's just a bang next to downtown Burj Khalifa, the world's tallest tower, and so on and so forth. In fact, when I started the DIFC, that entire area of downtown was just barren land in 2004-05. There was nothing there. Burj Khalifa did not exist, and it was just basically just barren land. And it was going to come up as, but we obviously, the entire city knew the designs of every district and how things will look. This was designed to look like a commercial district. And for doing so, we had before, looked at all the top financial centers in the world, all the top business districts in the world, studied how they looked and, how they behaved, what people liked, what kind of businesses would, what kind of retail businesses would be successful, and so on and so forth. So we kind of studied that extensively and worked on our design with that feel. And so if you look at, the gate building is a very artistic looking building, but it also has got a nice landscape around it where we keep big, large artworks, on tour, kept around. Big art galleries in the district. We have Christie's, for example, auction house there. We have large international and regional art galleries, top end fine dining restaurants. So you kind of, you give the community what they want, but it also enhances the profile of the district. So it's nice, of course, to have fancy buildings, but you also need to bring in that life and environment. And while studying financial districts, we also looked at some very boring cities when it came to doing business, like Frankfurt. You have these stunning looking buildings, but doesn't have a soul, doesn't have life. People don't feel the vibe as you would feel, for example, in London City or New York, and so on and so forth. So we learned from the goods and the bad examples and kind of tried to bring in the best elements. Again, because you're trying to attract top end talent from around the world. So when they land straight from Manhattan or they land from the city of London, they need to feel that they've not kind of got downgraded. They're right up there in their the class that they are operating in. But doesn't mean that every district in the world has to do that, because we were attracting a particular audience, and so you got to see who's going to come down there and then make it spec to that design and to wow them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And a follow-up to that, and very related, how did you guys structure the infrastructure? And what I mean by that is something specific. Obviously, we've had to consider this at Prospera, and when you look at examples around the world from like China or elsewhere, or in the U.S. master plan communities, whatever, you seem to kind of have another chicken or egg problem, or another ambiguity problem, which is you want to build enough infrastructure initially to service the initial development and to enable future growth, but you don't want to build day one for a 1 billion person city or a 1 million person city or whatever, like a massive city, because the capital outlays and maintenance cost of having that infrastructure before the people and the buildings are there is just massive. Like, it's just completely unsustainable. And we've seen these ghost city projects in China and elsewhere in the world fail for this exact reason. They build up this massive infrastructure and then no one's there to use it. So it just has this massive carrying cost and it dies effectively. How did you guys solve that kind of scaling problem, let's call it the infrastructure scaling problem, let's call it, in the DIFC?
Yeah, it's a very tricky problem, and it's obviously an issue that one needs to tackle very well. And we did that by a very strong planning of how the district will evolve. In addition to our own projects and how we are developing, every plot that's sold has a pretty clear cycle of how and when they will build up. In fact, even after the first 10 years, 40 to 50% of DIFC was not built, and it was plots still owned by the authority. So they didn't, we didn't sell those, and we didn't develop that either, because obviously you can't develop everything and build the infrastructure for everything and expect everybody's going to come on day one. It's a ramp up and it keeps on growing, but you need to follow that. At the same time, there are infrastructure costs which are associated, which we are not in the business of developing or maintaining or managing infrastructure. So we partner with the right partners. I'll give an example. In Dubai, you need air conditioning. You need very strong air conditioning. The temperature right now is like 130 degrees, right? So, and humidity, I was running day for yesterday, was 100%. So it is crazy, and you need a lot of air conditioning. At the same time, if you look at the building behind, you don't see any air conditioning unit sticking out, because the entire district has got central air conditioning, right? And there's a central plant that provides district cooling, and the infrastructure is wired that every plot gets its cool air from an outlet, and then when they build their own buildings, they take that load from that load. So we partnered with a district cooling company and told them that this is the outlay over the next 15-20 years of how buildings will be built and the capacity utilization, and please make sure that you provide the right kind of air conditioning at a particular fixed price, which goes up based on inflation as well as gas prices and water prices. And that is provided to all the buildings in the district. And so you kind of plan it in a way that even the third party operator is not just ramping up and building crazy things, because he knows when he needs to build. And we as a building developer, if I haven't built, then I need to pay for that infrastructure irrespective of utilization. So the contracts were structured such that, you don't kind of have one party paying because the other party is not using, and your costs actually go up. So again, it's a fantastic pay as you go model, but you say what you want and we'll provide it to you, but then you pay for it even if you don't use it, right? And likewise, whether it came to electricity, or you have government agencies providing electricity, but they kind of understand exactly how you're going to be ramping up and then provide the required utilities. The telecom infrastructure, we've actually made sure that nobody's digging up everything. So the entire outlet, the layout of all of the undergrounding tunnels were all laid out up front. There's a beautiful truck tunnel that runs underneath this entire district, so you don't even have garbage trucks actually going around collecting garbage. They actually go down the tunnel. Nobody sees them. All these buildings are designed at the same podium level, ground level, underground level. So all maybe 60-70 towers in total eventually, but all of them will have the same layout underneath. So there's consistency maintained. So it was a well-designed master plan, but also well commercially run master plan.
That makes a ton of sense. And I'm especially intrigued by the underground garbage truck thing, just because that's always such a problem. Like whenever I go to Manhattan, right, I'm like, oh, look at these beautiful gleaming glass towers. And there's just literal trash on the street. It's infuriating. A follow-up question on that infrastructure question, though. So Dubai is rather famous for, among many other things, some of the elements of kind of smart city technology that the city employs, and the DIFC is no different. I'd love to hear, one, what kind of smart city tech you guys use, and then two, how you plan for that as well. Because back in 2004, 2005, 2006, smart cities were barely a thing. It wasn't a buzzword like it is now, and a kind of a hot topic like it is now. But you guys were some of the first to pull it off. So what kind of tech do you guys have, and how'd you plan for it? Did you kind of see it coming early and see the advantage early, or how did that work?
Also, at an overall Dubai level, there's a fantastic effort on smart cities and doing things right, and enabling technology to doing a lot of things for businesses, but for individuals, residents, and so on and so forth. So while we are an independent authority, we do plug in with a lot of the government agencies that are actually developing that. But at the same time, as in a lot of smart technologies are not infrastructure or physical, they're software, they're enabling businesses to do everything from registration to licensing to applications for visas on an electronic platform. So we have, over a period of time evolved from using X technology to Y technology to cloud technology to allow for businesses to do their registration and all these other their business requirements. We've also kind of, progressed for a simple thing like even parking using no technology to smart gates to smart recognition to move on. So your car number is totally if you're a registered car, just your car number plate is looked at by the camera and the gate opens. It's as simple as that. And you kind of evolve and use technologies. But what we did is made sure that the entire district, irrespective whether it was owned by the DIFC or not, or third party, had to follow that same norm. Because you can't have like pockets of excellence and then some other developers or owners not using the same platform or technology. So irrespective of the ownership of these assets, the way these buildings are run, managed, had to follow a particular standard, and that was the uniform standard applied throughout the district.
I totally agree with all your vision. I would like to talk about Honduras. Since your visit in Honduras, what do you think about Honduras? I don't know if you remember, you and I met in San Pedro Sula with a lot of entrepreneurs. Yeah, I'm very interested in your answer related to the persons, because I'm very interested in attracting top talent of the world to prosper, and especially to Honduras. And how do you guys attract top talent to Dubai? And what is your perspective in the Honduras people?
I was amazed. I mean, to be honest, I had a very little idea about Honduras before I landed there. But when I reached and I went to 3 cities in Honduras mainland, I of course went to Rotan and the lovely island and looked at the prospect, and I said, you know what, this is amazing. It's right in the middle of 2 continents. It's got, you know, multilingual capability. It's got a lot of natural resources. I mean, think of us in Dubai. We just have sand, very little resources. In fact, Dubai did not even have any oil and does not have oil, didn't have wealth. But it is basically said, you know what, we're going to build what's required for the rest of the world and make them feel, wow, this is what I need. So if you build to suit, you build the right kind of product that people need, and then you have the right kind of environment that's enabling that to work, it has to work. And then when I heard about all these lovely things that Honduras has done in terms of reforming the constitutions, allowing for these ZAs, I said, wow, you know what, this is kind of even a step ahead of what Dubai has done, because it kind of creates these private municipalities that can effectively become like a new country in more than just a business respect. It's on a larger scale. And then I went to Rotan, and it's a stunning, beautiful island, very friendly people all over Honduras as well as in Rotan. And you've got the potential is immense, and basically it's only we who can limit the potential, because you got everything. You got connectivity to United States, you got an airport, you got people, talent available that can be harnessed, and you got the ability to create a jurisdiction from scratch, a real estate environment from scratch, and build it to a world-class level. So essentially, it's got all the right ingredients for becoming a very, very successful construct that can be not only successfully implemented in Rotan, but also replicated around a lot of these markets, and can be very powerful as well in becoming a catalyst for economic growth.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And just to follow up on that specifically, well, first I want to clarify to the audience, obviously Prospera is a municipality of Honduras, not a new country per se. Chirag, I know what you're driving at by that. It's new governance institutions that work a heck of a lot better than the Honduran institutions. I just wanted to clarify that for the audience. We in no way, shape, or form are insinuating that Prospera is a new country. It's a municipality within Honduras. It's just a special economic zone, much the same way the DIFC is part of the overall both Dubai municipality and of the United Arab Emirates. But a follow-up question related to the labor component Max was just speaking about. How, and especially because this was your role, so I'd love to hear about this. How difficult was it to attract those initial tenants and those anchor tenants, especially because when you start off, right, you have, even if you have a little bit of built environment, you have kind of a dream, and you're having to prove to these first few tenants especially, not just that you're a competent business, but that you're a competent government effectively too. Like they're test driving the system for the first time. They're your beta users for the software, if you will, almost. So how do you kind of sell it to them, and how hard was it to get those first few businesses?
So yeah, I kind of structured it in 2 parts. It's probably, one part is obviously getting them to sign up to join. And that is not the most difficult part. The most difficult part is getting them to actually expand and grow. Because people might just sign up and say, I'm going to set up an office with 2 people down there, right? Because what's the risk? It's not too much of a risk, right? If I don't like it after 1 or 2 years, I go. But when do I actually sign up to be a very important committed player in the district or in the region? And that obviously is a factor of course the business plans of these companies and what their aspirations are. But also, like you rightly said, it's about looking at the system, whether it is working, testing it out, and going through the motions. You cannot get that on day 0. Irrespective of whatever you put on paper and whatever you build, and you can bring in confidence by getting the right kind of people to look after that. When it comes to the courts are set of judges, top-notch judges from different parts of the world, or the regulators, or the people running the district, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't kind of answer all their questions on whether these will work, whether you will be able to regulate properly, whether you will be able to, the courts will function properly, and so on and so forth. But people obviously see it, and then they keep on investing. So you got to do both. You got to obviously bring them in and then make sure that they see the progression and demonstrate. So if you're doing your job correctly, people will continue to grow and people will continue to, more people will continue to come. But the key is that you demonstrate where you're going and then stick to that plan.
Got it. That makes sense. And I just have two final questions for you, Chirag. First up, I'd love to hear your perspective as one of the kind of original players in the space and the most successful. What's your prognosis and outlook on this type of zone-based development? Because obviously we at Prosper are a little bit biased. We think it's the future of humanity and the future of unlocking humanity's potential. But I'd love to hear your perspective as someone who has done it before successfully.
Yeah, I think the beauty about such environments is that you're not trying to change the entire country or the entire world at one go. You're doing it in bits and pieces that you can control, you can manage, you can curate nicely, develop properly, attract the right kind of talent and businesses and people to assemble that together. But the impact it can have is substantial. The per capita GDP contribution of every person working in the DIFC was 6 times that of somebody in Dubai. It worked out to $250,000 per person. That was the contribution just one person working in the DIFC made. At the end of last year, we had 25,000 people working in the district. Right, so you're effectively curating something for a very specific purpose. But when you do that, you're able to get a significantly higher impact to the GDP and significantly higher impact to all the efforts that you're doing. And then you can replicate that in other environments as well. And what happens is, because people see the difference, the rest of Honduras will also, all the other municipalities in Honduras would say, hey, you know what? Even we can improve our governance. We can improve our effectiveness, a one-stop shop way of doing business. And the entire country benefits from that. So it's Prospera in the true sense. It's not just Prospera for that district, but it's a wider benefit to the country, and hopefully to larger parts of Central America, as well as regional environments that can benefit from something like this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We often talk about Prospera being an example, not just to the rest of Honduras, but to Central America and even the rest of the world, to kind of show how this can be done right. This sustainable development and the unleashing of untapped potential can happen in a way that is inclusive of the local community, in a way that highlights Honduras, and in a way that brings the best of Central America and the best of Honduras and the best of the world together. So that you kind of hit the nail on the head of exactly what Prosper is trying to do as well. And hopefully we see a lot more of these things pop up, not just around the world, but also in Central America and also in Honduras as well. We'd love nothing more than to have 10 more companies building an even better version of Prosper in Honduras, because at the end of the day, while it might make us a little less profitable, it makes the Honduran people orders of magnitude more prosperous, which is the whole point of this entire exercise. So I got one last question for you, Chirag. And you can answer this one with relation to the entire city of Dubai or just DIFC, your pick. What is one thing about Dubai or the DIFC that is your favorite kind of hidden thing that I, as a visitor, as a foreigner, would never be able to find?
About DIFC?
Yes, either DIFC or anywhere in the whole city. What's kind of your favorite secret city thing that only you know, because you've lived there, that I would never be able to find as a foreigner visiting?
Oh, what you would kind of not find as a foreigner visiting is or maybe you do and you don't, but it's the soul of Dubai. It's the soul of doing things which are different and making it work and executing it well. So you kind of see all these marvelous structures and all these constructs. Everybody can design these and put it on paper and kind of build these or whatever, right? But the 360-degree approach of making things work in more than just about just constructing stuff and so on and so forth is somewhere in the soul of this city and how people are wired, which is so unique. And so, having worked here now for 15 years, you can feel it, and it's kind of ingrained in you that you just don't think about all these constructs in thin air. You got to make it all work together. And the proof of the pudding is when actually people are living here, working here, and contributing to their own development as well as the development of the city. So people see these glitzy buildings and they say, wow, we can build this and we can build this and we can do this and we can do that. But it's all about execution.
I love it. I love the focus on execution. It kind of reminds me of every time I go to Manhattan, it's like I get this vibration of energy that's in the air, almost like almost a manic energy, like you just want to do something. So I know exactly what you mean. Awesome. Well, listen, Chirag, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. It's been very enlightening, and this has been the Epicenter Podcast with Chirag Shah.
Thank you. Pleasure.